All right, everyone, we are back. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry we had some technical difficulties. So we are back on. I'm your dough doctor. I'm your host and baking expert, Chef Colette. So thank you guys so much for jumping back on. I'm really sorry about that. And Katie, I'm so sorry that I couldn't make it work, but I'm gonna have to go to an Instagram expert and find out why. So thank you guys. I see you all coming back to the live and I really, really appreciate it. All right, let's recap where we were. So where we were was I created the puff pastry dough, and then I rolled it out to a 6 by 14 inch rectangle. I folded it like a book, and now it's in the freezer for 10 minutes. And I know that somebody has a 10-minute timer going for me, so please let me know when the 10 minutes are up. All right, let's jump into the questions. All right, so the first question came from our baker, Wendy, and she asked, how do I make pretzels in advance? Well, actually, no, that's a lie. Her question was, can pretzel dough freeze? Now, Wendy has a small baking business and she wanted to start offering pretzels as part of her product line. Well, here's the deal, and it's a teaching moment. Some doughs with yeast freeze great, and some doughs with yeast do not. And pretzel is one of them. It's low hydrated and it's just too lean. So those two combinations, that would be like bagel and pretzel, they don't make for good freezers. So what I recommended to our baker, Wendy, is go ahead, make the pretzels start to finish, and then freeze them. And before serving them or selling them, refresh them in a 350-degree oven, and that brings them right back. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they need to be served in the moment, but that act of refreshing, that's what it's called, refreshing, will make a big difference, and the final product will taste pretty much like it just came out of the oven. Now, the only thing I did want to say as a caveat to Wendy, our baker Wendy, is that she had mentioned wanting to make cinnamon sugar pretzels. And as a teaching moment, I wanted to talk about that. Bakers, anytime we freeze exposed sugar, think about a cinnamon sugar pretzel dipped in sugar, things are gonna get weird in the refrigerator, in the freezer. The sugar is going to begin to attract moisture, because one thing I want you to think about is that our refrigerators are full, and freezers are full of humidity. If they weren't, and that's how they're designed, if they weren't, our food would dry out. It would be awful. So exposed sugar, because it attracts moisture, gets in the freezer, even well wrapped, and if it sits there more than a couple days, it's going to get watery. So what I suggest for our baker is that for her cinnamon sugar variation, she bakes them plain, and after they're refreshed, dip them in melted butter or brush them liberally with melted butter, because everything's better with butter, and then dip them in the cinnamon sugar. So that's our first question right there. And our second question came in about Pullman pans. And you might be thinking, what? Pullman pans? What's that? It is a loaf pan with a lid on it, all right? And these were designed in the 1850s, when everyone was beginning to travel like train, which took a while, so meals had to be prepared. Not just one meal like we might get on a flight, or two if you're going to Europe, but breakfast, lunch, dinner for a couple days. So sandwiches and toast needed to be baked. Oven space was really limited, so somebody designed this pan with a lid. Now they come longer And I have lots of memories of baking these in class at Le Cordon Bleu. And then also I remember baking them in production at Le Cordon Bleu. So how much dough? How much dough for this pan, which measures 4 by 9, by the way, as opposed to a regular loaf pan that measures 8.5 by 4.5. So thank you, 10 minutes, I got it. So this is gonna take 975 grams of dough. This is the shorter one. If you're talking about the commercial ones, they take 3 pounds of dough. And I'm not quite sure, that's 48 ounces times 28.35. Can't quite do that in my head, but that's how you would get the grams, all right? So for the home version, and you can get these online, Williams-Sonoma sells them, Sur La Table sells them. If you eat a lot of toast and you need to make a lot of sandwiches, or you have a tea shop and you want to just make perfect bread, this is a great pan. So they're available, and that's how much dough they use. All right, so now before we get to our final question, I'm going to grab my dough. For those of you joining us on the line, I guess we're on a line, we're on a party line. We're making quick puff pastry today, and I started our live earlier by making the dough and giving it its first 2 folds. Sometimes they're called turns, all right? So now we're gonna do that again. And again, puff pastry takes a book fold. But for those of you who make croissants and Danish and other laminated doughs, and you wanna just stick with the trifold, that's fine too. We're still gonna have plenty of flake. All right, so here's our little block of dough, okay? So we're gonna tap it. I like to tap gently first, all right? Tap gently first. Okay, and we're at about 6 inches. Great. And then I'm going to give it a quarter turn. And as I explained before, small batches, I'll roll up, I will fold vertically. Normally, large batches, I'm horizontal. But here's the thing, bakers, and this is just like if you are rolling out pie dough or you're rolling out cookie dough, when we're rolling, we have the most leverage rolling up and back. So we can always do that, but if we have a particular size of dough where we want to orient it a certain way when we're folding, then you just give it a quarter turn. All right, so now let's go. I have my yardsticks. And I'm going to roll 1/4 inch thick. You know, back in the day, we used to laminate thicker, but I have discovered we don't want to laminate, we don't want to fold too thin, we don't want to fold too thick. The 1/4 inch is perfect. If you have a lot of flour, brush it away. First thing we're going to do, grab the top, fold it in half, and then again book fold, which means the bottom edge comes up to the middle and the top edge comes to the middle. There is a little bit of a space. You can see it. It's like the spine of a book, and then we just fold it over. We need that space for the dough to fold cleanly. And I thought of a really funny memory. I don't know if Chef Santos is in the audience. He was one of my, we used to teach together at Cordon Bleu. And I was so nervous when I first started there that the first time I demoed this, I got ahead of myself and I gave it a quadruple fold, pretty much out of control. That was a long time ago. I don't think anybody noticed though. Now we're gonna do this one more time and then we're done, which is kind of magical. So again, tap or roll to your 6 inches. And you might be thinking, well, what if I wanna make more? How would those affect my measurements? You would just double them, okay? So now that I'm at my 6 inches, and you know I have come under comment about tapping dough, but because the fear is shattering the butter. So, but if you're gentle, it's a good way to coax the dough into shape without activating a bunch of gluten. Because the more gluten we activate, and we do this by rolling, the more it springs back. So Amna's Kitchen asked, what are we going to make? Well, this week, bakers, if you want to join in the first savory bake, you're gonna make your dough and put it in the freezer. And then next week, we're gonna explore some really beautiful savory bakes with this puff pastry. All right, well, I better keep rolling. That's all I can say. All right, 1/4 inch thick. You want to brush away any excess, fold your dough in half, and then if you are, I want to show you this in camera, if things aren't lining up as you're folding, see that space right there? You can just coax the dough. You can stretch it a little bit, not going to hurt anything. And then we're going to fold it. And it's pretty soft right now, so I'm gonna put it back in, not the freezer, but the refrigerator, and let it chill for 10-15 minutes. And I did something with the, no, here it is. Oh my goodness. Chef Santos is in the audience. I don't know if you remember that for first puff pastry day in Baking 1, but I did a doozy in that demo. And you were so kind. All right. And then what you're gonna do is after it chills a little bit, firms up a little bit, pull it out, tap it into a 6 by 6 inch rectangle, wrap it in plastic wrap, slide it into a Ziploc bag, and freeze it until next week. And then, you know, it thaws relatively quickly. So, but if you want to be sure, then put it in the refrigerator Friday night and you'll be ready to bake on Saturday. On Wednesdays, I always post on Wednesday and I'll send what we're making and a grocery list. And it's probably stuff you have in your gardens because the suggestion for savory bakes came from one of our bakers who has an overflowing garden. And she messaged and she said, Chef, what can I do with all these gorgeous heirloom tomatoes? Well, my bakers, that's a problem to have, and you know that we can solve it. Before I throw this back in the refrigerator, oh, you can see I have it labeled too. There's nothing worse than mystery packages in the freezer of dough. It's like, what? What is that? So, one thing I wanted to say about the quick puff pastry that's so exciting, and you saw really how easy it is to make. Anytime you need puff pastry, you need, and I can't reiterate this enough, and it can be thin, like a thin pastry layer, a galette, a turnover, a Napoleon. You can use this quick puff pastry. We only need to go through the work of classic puff pastry when we are really looking for the volume, all right? And normally we don't look for that, we go buy it at the grocery store. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I know you like to bake from scratch, you like to DIY things, and so it was a great suggestion for this quick puff pastry. to start us off in our end of summer baking. I know you're like, wait, Chef, it's July, it's not over yet. Well, it's gonna be Labor Day in the blink of an eye, my bakers. Any suggestion for other bakes or things you'd like to see, drop them in the comments, and then please, or message me during the week. I really want to make sure that the show has content that you want to see. All right, we have one more question, which was a great question. So one of our bakers wrote in, and they were asking about foil versus parchment for lining our baking sheets and cake pans. All right, so I have foil and I have parchment paper. Foil has so here's my answer. Foil has limited use when we're baking. When we're cooking, it's very, very helpful. The only time, and here's the thing, foil conducts heat. So if we line a baking tray with foil and then we go to bake cookies on it, it's like putting the cookies in a tanning bed and in the oven. We run the risk of over caramelized bottoms and sides, and also if the foil flakes off in any way, then that could be or sticks, it can be ingested. And parchment paper is not great to eat either, but it's a little bit easier than on the system than foil. Both items pass right through us because the body is miraculous, but at the same time, we don't really want to be ingesting foil. So for cooking, for the grill, for roasting potatoes, for all those great things, foil, foil, foil. For baking, parchment, 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 that's the way to go. Now, one thing I do want to show you that's really helpful with foil, I don't know if I have anyone watching from my Escoffier class, but in one of my current Escoffier classes, we made a tart and we've done this on the show, where the tart the shell had to be partially baked. So what if the outside edge is over browning and the inside is raw? This is where foil is our best friend. Parchment, sorry to throw shade, but you're just not gonna cut it. So we take our foil, so visualize with me, bakers, you've got a tart shell in the oven. It's full of beans and rice and you're blind baking it because you're making something just luminous with it. But those edges are over browning. What do? Well, that's when you grab your foil and you fold it in quarters like this. And then, and then you've got 3 open edges, right? And then you've got a pointed edge, and the pointed edge we're cutting. So we open this up and we have a hole, and shiny side down, it goes over our tart. So our beautiful edges kind of slow down and stop cooking, but that center that's looking raw is fully baked, all right? So that's pretty much the best use of foil in the baking kitchen, all right? Be careful with foil. Again, just imagine your chocolate chip cookies going into a tanning bed, because basically, bakers, that's what it's like. I'm a cookie on foil. I'm gonna over brown. Alrighty. Bakers, if you have friends who love baking, please tell them about the show so we can increase our community. And the whole point of it is we're here because we love baking, and my purpose in life is to help you have your best outcomes, because the better we bake, the more we bake, and baking makes life sweet. So I'll see you next week. Watch for the grocery list and what we'll be making on Wednesday's regular post. And other than that, keep cool, keep healthy, stay safe, and I can't wait to see you next week. Take care, bakers. Bye. And I will fix that. I'll figure out that technology. Katie Malud, I'm so sorry. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.